West, you're delivering weapons to people in Syria who eat human organs. The West says, these are the bad guys. Our weapons are going to be for the good rebels. Do you buy that argument?
Well, it depends on whom do they mean by good guys. We have been through good terrorists and bad terrorists many times. Al-Qaeda basically was born from the Mujahideen movement financed by the United States when the Soviets were in Afghanistan. And then Al-Qaeda boomeranged. And in Mali now, the French are fighting those guys whom they armed and supported in Libya. So it has to be understood very clearly by everyone. What do we mean by good guys and bad guys? The most effective, by all standards and by all assessments, the most effective military group fighting the regime in Syria is Jabhat al-Nusra. There are numerous facts about defections from the Free Syrian Army to Jabhat al-Nusra because Jabhat al-Nusra is better financed and better equipped. So the problem is that the weapons are coming to the region anyway. And if you take, stock of what is being used by the opposition, you would find a lot of arms shipped by the West, including the United States, to the Gulf countries and to other countries in the region. So this smuggling continues, and this is very dangerous because the leading opposition force on the ground is very extremist.
Have you asked for or received any guarantees from the US, France, or the UK about the type of weapons they plan to send to the Syrian opposition? Will they get, for example, advanced weaponry such as handheld anti-aircraft missiles or anti-tank missiles, both of which could be a game changer in the conflict?
I don't think we would be interested in discussing this thing. We believe this is absolutely illegitimate, and we are not going to legitimize it by starting discussing some conditions on which these supplies could be justified. The types of weaponry you mentioned, including the manpads, have been reported as already being provided to the Syrian rebels. Anti-tank grenades, grenade launchers, and other heavy weaponry. These facts are readily available in the media. I have no means of making sure that this is true or not. But we have been reading a lot, and at least some of those facts, I think, could be verified.
You haven't discussed this issue with your US colleagues, urging them to refrain from sending advanced weaponry?
Well, we made our position very clear. And the president, when he was meeting with his colleagues during the summit of G8 in Lausanne, made it very clear that we believe this is a very big mistake.
What about the timing for these arms deliveries? The UK has previously said it wouldn't supply any weapons to Syria as long as efforts to host a peace conference are continuing. But with the advances by government forces on the battlefield, is it possible that US and other countries will start supplies immediately? What are they telling you, if anything?
We have been promoting the idea of the conference immediately after Geneva I was endorsed. And we have been proposing in the Security Council and elsewhere to convene the same group, probably extended, and to start discussing the practical implementation. In other words, we have been promoting the idea of the conference all the time, irrespective of the situation on the ground. Our Western colleagues embraced the idea of the conference only when the government started advancing. They were not ready to discuss it when many people believed that the opposition would take Damascus very soon. If now they will be moving in the direction of what some opposition leaders are saying, namely, let's first restore military balance on the ground and then we'll go to the conference, this would be a disaster for all diplomatic efforts, because this would never end.
Is your concern that the Western weapons will mainly reach groups such as Jabhat al-Nusra?
I don't understand your obsession with this issue. We are not discussing this. We are not discussing conditions of delivering these weapons to the opposition. We believe this is a legitimate full stop.
The US is apparently considering imposing a no-fly zone in part of Syria. That was reported by US media recently. Are you concerned that S-300 missiles, if they are delivered, will be used to shoot down American planes? It's perhaps a fanciful possibility, but...
First, the contract on S-300s is absolutely legal. It's transparent, and it is fully in line with the international norms and with the Russian export control legislation. Second, the contract has not yet been finalized. Third, the Americans are living patriots after this exercise in Jordan, together with F-16 planes. And no one is asking them not to do this. The region is really full of weaponry, including the weapons, offensive weapons, which have been supplied in the past to the countries of the region, and some of these weapons are infiltrating into Syria.
Let's assume a pessimistic scenario. Peace efforts collapse. Assad is overthrown by a combination of a Western no-fly zone and huge arms deliveries to the rebels. What does that mean for the region, in your view, for neighboring countries such as Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon?
First, we have to really understand what is our goal. If our goal is the conference, then we must avoid any discussions and, of course, any action designed to establish no-fly zone. We must avoid confrontational debates and one-sided resolutions in the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council, because all this is not helping to create the atmosphere necessary to convene a conference. As for the, as you said, the consequences of a pessimistic scenario, we have to take a comprehensive look at the region, and we have to understand who are we fighting there. If we are fighting regimes, not all of them, but those whom we don't like, and don't fight the regimes whom we like, in spite of them not being democratic, then we have really to agree on the rules of the game. If we are fighting terrorists and extremists, then we must be consistent everywhere, in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, in Mali, and so on and so forth. I think that consistency is lacking in the approach of our Western friends, and we're trying to impress upon them the need to have this comprehensive look and to agree on the strategy, because otherwise we would be witnessing piecemeal approaches, ad hoc movements, when somebody is declared a dictator, and then the public opinion is agitated. And then we are told we cannot avoid acting because the public opinion is really very angry with this guy. It's either we think about the stability in the region, which is crucial for geopolitical interests of all of us, or we are motivated by some subjective considerations like domestic politicking before one or another election.
I mean, if the scenario I've drawn actually happens, you know, what would that mean in your view for the region? How much instability would there be?
Look, it's for political analysts to analyze hypothetical scenarios. Diplomacy is about trying to avoid worst-case scenario. That's what we are trying to do.
President-elect Rouhani has said that the current government of Syria should remain in place until elections in 2014. The G8 closing statement called for a transitional government in Syria, and it didn't mention what should happen to President Assad. Do you think that it's possible that President Assad could continue to play some role?
It's not for G8, it's not for you or for me to decide the future of President Assad, it's for the Syrian people. The G8 repeated verbatim the formula of Geneva I, which says we would like the Syrians to start negotiations and to create a transitional governing organ or transitional governing body which will have full executive authority, and to do this on the basis of mutual consent. Period. Nothing to add, you know. It's up to the Syrians. And there is no precondition. And the government reiterated its readiness to come to Geneva. And they did so after the G8 communique was issued. And the opposition never said that they would come without any preconditions. They say we can come only to receive capitulation from the regime. It's not serious. Not because we like the regime, not because we want the regime to stay, but because it is for the Syrians to decide. And to say you must capitulate and deliver the power to us, it's just not realistic. It's not going to happen.
Where do your efforts, joint efforts with the US stand at the moment on hosting this peace conference? Can you give us an assessment of where we are?
We have consultations with participation, I mean, the Russians, the Americans, and the United Nations team. We are discussing the list of invitees. And there are two problems, basically. Who is to represent the opposition? Not each and every important opposition group wants to go under the umbrella of the coalition, because, if only because the coalition never presented its program. They don't have any vision for Syria which would be available to us and to others. And second, because the coalition is really taking quite radical positions. So the groups, the opposition groups who are active inside Syria, like National Coordinating Committee, like Supreme Kurdish Council, they said that they absolutely insist on participating, and if they manage to agree on a platform which would be unifying platform and which would also involve the national coalition, fine. But if they are not able to reach such an agreement, they must be represented some other way. And the second problem is outside participation, so to say. Other countries, apart from Syria, we are absolutely convinced that all Arab neighbors of Syria must be invited, and that Iran must be there. That's something which I believe is absolutely unavoidable if we want a process which is inclusive, and if we want all important outside players to be there to push the Syrians to an agreement. And so far there are doubts on the part of the United States regarding the invitation of Iran, and I believe this is delaying. But in a broader sense, we want to understand whether the US is really consistent with the idea of a conference, because the activities of the American diplomats in the United Nations, in the General Assembly, in the Human Rights Council, activities promoting absolutely one-sided resolutions which are sending to the opposition a very wrong message. The activities like this no-fly zone preparations, the message the opposition is getting: guys, don't go to Geneva, don't say that you are going to negotiate with the regime, soon the things would change in your favor. So that's what we want to clarify. It's either the conference or the instigation of the opposition not to be flexible. I don't think it is possible to do both at the same time.
Have you received any new signals from Iran about its willingness to suspend uranium enrichment up to 20% since Rouhani's election as president? Does his election offer a big and new opportunity to reach a deal? And what sanctions, in your view, need to be lifted as a priority in return to get such a concession from?
It's all subject to negotiations, and the readiness of Iran to discuss the suspension of the 20% enrichment was demonstrated long before the elections, and the 3+3 group is going to convene, to propose a meeting soon after President Rouhani is inaugurated.
President Putin has said that the contract for the S-300 delivery will be implemented, although it has not been yet. At the same time, he said it's a very powerful weapon which can tilt the balance of power in the region. Isn't there is a logical contradiction here? It's a powerful weapon.
I have nothing to add because he said what he said, and this is true. And it is also true that the contract has not been finalized. It is also true that Patriot is also a very powerful weapon, and as well as the weapons sold by the United States mostly, but also by some Europeans, to the countries of the region. The region is full with weapons, and some of these weapons is taking an illegal route and gets into the zones of conflict.
Will Russia fulfill this contract no matter what, or are there some sort of conditions under which?
I said already everything I want to say.
The U.S. has said that the use of chemical weapons in Syria is sort of a red line for the U.S., after which it will start sending weapons to the opposition. Is there some sort of red line for Russia?
Well, we are categorically against any use of any weapons of mass destruction. And we are categorically against any attempts to speculate about this, trying to achieve political goals. I'm afraid that's what we are witnessing in Syria, or rather in a situation when the chemical weapons theme is floated. We have been told by the Americans, by the French, by the British that they have proofs. And we said, of course, we want to see those proofs. What they showed to us is absolutely unconvincing. It's not based on facts, and it cannot be taken as a proof. At the same time, we supported immediately the investigation by the UN of the reported case of use of chemical substances in the vicinity of Aleppo on the 19th of March. Unfortunately, the UN conditioned sending the experts by the demand to allow access anywhere on the Syrian territory, to any site, to any person, without explaining the reason. And that was not supported by the Syrian government, and I understand them, because what was demanded from them is absolutely the same as the regime imposed on Iraq when it was under Chapter 7 sanctions. But the government of Syria said, please send this team to this particular place. And after that, if you have any other indications that there must be an investigation elsewhere, we will be ready to consider it. And indications about other places were provided by the French and the British, who said that they also want, in addition to the investigating the March incident, they want the experts to look into the reports which took place last December. My question is, if you knew something last December, why did you wait until March for 3 months or so before you said that experts must also investigate that particular instances? So it's all smacks of politics and speculation. On the other hand, there were reports about the opposition using chemical weapons. The Turkish police reported that they apprehended some Jabhat al-Nusra combatants who had some zarine, homemade zarine with them. There were reports that Al-Qaeda in Iraq had some underground laboratories producing zarine. Then both of these reports were withdrawn, I would say. But I would still be very much interested in details. And of course, we know the statement of Carla Del Ponte, a member of the independent commission created by the Human Rights Council, who said that she had proofs that the opposition was using chemical weapons and not the government. And by the way, International Committee for Red Cross, which is represented throughout Syria, reported publicly a few days ago that they don't have any evidence that the government was using chemical weapons.
Do you think there are ways to persuade the Syrian authorities to destroy the chemical weapons stockpiles?
Well, we first have to really resolve the conflict. Second, you have to make sure that the Syrian authorities apply for membership in the organization to prohibit chemical weapons. And then the procedures of this organization should be applied.
Speaking about the conference for which you are preparing together with your American colleagues, Do you think the demand contained in the G8 communique for the rebels to purge Al-Qaeda-linked militants from their ranks is realistic, given the fact that Jabhat al-Nusra is playing the main role in operations on the ground?
The G8 actually issued slightly different call. It didn't call upon the opposition to get rid of the terrorists. It called upon the government and the opposition to unite against terrorists and to expel them from Syria. And I think it's a very important statement coming from G8, and it should not be really underestimated.
Given the fact that Jabhat al-Nusra, as you already said, is playing the main role in fighting against the government forces, and it clearly rejects the talks, how realistic it is to, even try to convince them?
Jabhat al-Nusra is not going to be invited to the talks. It's not for them to decide whether they come to a conference or not. They cannot be even considered. They are terrorists and they must be treated as terrorists.
But if we assume that the talks take place and it makes some decisions, Jabhat al-Nusra will just continue fighting, won't they?
We come back to what I said earlier. Everyone must take a decision which would be sustainable and which would be consistent, not just basing our actions on case-by-case scenarios, on likings and dislikings. We have to unite, all of us, against bad guys who are considered bad guys by everyone.
The Putin-Obama meeting, in its communique, mentioned security at the Sochi Olympics as one of the possible areas for cooperation. What will this cooperation consist of?
Well, it will consist of making sure that the potentials of the respective services and agencies of Russia and the United States are brought together to make the preparations more efficient. I hope you don't expect me to go into the details and to disclose what precautionary measures are going to be taken.
Is Russia prepared to give the U.S. security agencies some sort of freedom of maneuver in making sure that security
this is not under the competence of the foreign ministry. Whatever is going to be agreed between the services of Russia and the United States would be applied.
Political analysts like to theorize about militants from Russia's North Caucasus or elsewhere fighting in Syria could eventually pose a threat to the Sochi Olympics. Do you think there is a danger here?
I'm sure this would be taken into account very seriously, and this is not only relevant in the context of the Olympics. It's also relevant in the context of day-to-day life of the entire Europe, the United States, and other countries, because the mercenaries and the so-called freedom fighters found in Syria, they are coming from dozens of countries. And when this war is over, and all wars end one day or another, these guys would not be busy, and they might look for some engagement in the countries where they citizens of which they are.
Do you think that the insurgency in Russia's North Caucasus regions poses any threat to the Olympics?
No, because I don't really think that there is an insurgency. What do you mean?
I mean the continuing terrorist attacks in Dagestan.
That's different from insurgency, as you might understand. Terrorist attacks happen. They are not as numerous as before, and the Russian security services are becoming much more efficient in not only fighting the terrorists, but also in preventing terrorist attacks. There have been several cases when serious terrorist attacks have been prevented, and I believe that this is terrorism, and terrorism is treated by all countries the same way, or at least must be.
But you don't think they're strong enough, I mean the militants, the terrorists in the Caucasus, to pose any real threat to the Olympics?
No.
Let me get over to the Obama proposals on nuclear arms reduction. You and other Russian officials already said in the past few days that this potential reductions should be linked to reductions made by other countries as well. But some analysts point to the fact that Russian conventional forces are weaker considerably than, say, the US or combined US and NATO forces. And that could be a factor behind Russia's decision-making on that. Isn't it true?
It's much more complex. The strategic stability is in question. And strategic stability depends on several factors, on much more factors than it used to during the Cold War. In addition to nuclear weapons of all kinds, there are new types of weapons, strategic weapons, non-nuclear, with even more serious effect militarily, the so-called Prompt Global Strike program of the United States. And it's a factor which would be felt by the strategic stability, which would affect the strategic stability in very serious way. Imagine a weapon which is delivered to any part of the earth in 1 hour. That's the goal. And it does not have inhuman effect of a nuclear weapon, but militarily it's much more efficient. So we have to take this into account before we decide on any further reductions. The United States also rejects proposals to conclude a treaty to prevent weapons from being put to outer space. They do plan to put weapons in outer space, and this is also going to be a very serious factor influencing the strategic stability. Missile defense, of course, it influences the strategic stability. The CTBT, the treaty to protect nuclear tests, must enter into force, and the United States is still to ratify it. President Obama promised to do this during his first term. He reiterated this now. We welcome this, and we need this, to happen for the treaty to enter into force. And of course, the conventional weapons, after the disappearance of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact and the expansion of NATO, the balance was shifted in favor of NATO. And this is also a factor influencing our security. And all this must be taken into account. And besides, if we speak about further reductions, provided we agree on all these things comprehensively, then the reductions would already be meant at a level which would be very commensurate with the level of the nuclear weapons of other states, not just the Russian Federation and the United States. So it has all to be taken into account.
Obviously, in your contacts with the U.S. colleagues, you have already raised all these issues. What has been their response to that?
Well, I think they understand what we mean, and I think they believe that this is a legitimate approach. At least President Obama told President Putin that he would be ready to ask his experts to discuss this with us in details.
On a more narrow subject of tactical nuclear weapons in Europe, is some deal possible separately on that or not?
Why?
Since it's...
What makes tactical nuclear weapons so exceptional outside of this very comprehensive balance of strategic stability factors? I don't think they should be.
So it should be all part of one complex deal: strategic, tactical nuclear weapons, new weapons, all that kind of stuff.
All factors influencing strategic stability must be considered comprehensively.
Russian officials said that conventional forces in Europe treaty is effectively dead. Do you think there is a need for replacement, or can be allowed to die?
Look, we live without this treaty for many years already, and nothing happened.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And it was not us, by the way, who stopped the negotiations. We were ready to negotiate 3-4 years ago. The American colleagues put forward some conditions which we could not accept, including the demand to us to basically withdraw the recognition of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Apple and oranges do not mix in this type of negotiations. Thank you.